I am having a bit more fun trying things out and making mistakes. I guess it's not just about being in art, but in general, being an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Your risk tolerance naturally goes up. So I allow myself to experiment more things, and I have fun with it.
I'm Karine, and this is The Seat of the Muse, a show I started out of love for meaningful conversations and a curiosity about the stories behind what people do. Each episode is an invitation to sit down, slow down, and listen in, because sometimes a single story can shift how we view our own. This is a space for the stories we don't always hear, the ones behind the titles, the passions, the quiet turning points, and the worlds hidden in plain sight. Now let's get into today's episode.
Francesca, welcome to the Seat of the Muse podcast.
Thank you. Hello.
I'm so happy that you're here, especially because, it's funny how we got in touch like 6 years ago now, and now we're back here together.
Very different times, isn't it?
Exactly. Your journey beautifully bridges two seemingly different worlds, the high finance and then the fine art. You've been for 8 years working at the most prestigious US American banks, and then you decided to transition and do your own thing and start your art advisory firm in 2023 called Bianca Arte. So we're going to talk about, how you started, then the transition that you had, how that kind of made you feel, and then what you're working on right now, and what this is all about.
So exciting. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So before starting any session, I like to ask my guest one question. Imagine we're doing this in front of an audience. Who is one person that you would like to see in your front row and why?
Oh, I was not prepared for this. Let me have a think.
Of course.
I guess it would be my father, because he's the reason why we're here in the first place. He's the reason why I started getting into art. He collects art, and he's been teaching me since I was a kid, and I always had it there. So definitely would have had a very different path if it wasn't for this passion he passed on to me. So I hope he's going to listen, and if he could be here, it would be fun too.
Okay, amazing. I love that. I'm sure he would be so proud of what you're doing. And so let's go back to the beginning. What originally made you pursue a career in finance?
I guess, studying business in university, in undergrad, it's a very broad space where you get to understand how different fields work. And finance appealed to me because of the challenge. I thought it's quite a complex subject. Especially financial markets were interesting to me because there are so many moving parts to understand, and you never really get a grasp on it, because the moment you understand what's happening, it's already changed. And I was very interested in those dynamics and navigating them with clients. So after undergrad, I went on to specialize in finance with a master's, and then went into banking straight away.
Okay, amazing. And so as we've said, you've worked for American banks with the likes of Goldman and JP Morgan. What were some, of the biggest things you've learned or the most formative experiences you've had during your time?
I would say especially the first few years when you're a graduate and you join these big banks, the training programs, the training you receive for me was the most formative, in the sense that it really shaped who I am as a person even now, and how I approach not just work but life in general, because you become more efficient, more focused, more practical version of yourself. And I carried that on over the years. Yeah. So that was the first takeaway, absolutely. Just, I like to say that I became the 2.0 version of myself in terms of
I love that.
performance, which is useful anyway. And then the second thing, especially as you grow more senior in banking and you start managing deals and client business and bringing in business more independently, I guess you toughen up from a personal perspective. So on the kind of soft skills side, you learn not to let anything get to you very personally. Business is really just business, and people are very much straight to the point. There's no time for sugarcoating. And I think it's quite a good resource to have in life in general.
Yeah, no, I fully agree on that point because I remember so well, like even from my own experience, at the bank, that I kept on telling myself, don't take anything personal, don't take anything personal. He's pissed off because of the market, not because of you.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. And it teaches you a lot of like discipline as well, to be just very structured in your day to day, because it's a very like you're following market times at the end of the day. So you have to be very structured and organized in your time. And so like during your 8 years in banks, did you ever feel like creatively fulfilled, or did you feel like, something was kind of missing?
To be honest, at that time, I never felt like something is missing. I always cultivated my passion for the creative field outside, and it was my hobby, my weekend, how I spent my free time in galleries, museums. And I had quite a bit of freedom in terms of doing my work, and I could come up with ideas, with business, with pitches. And there is quite a lot of meritocracy, so I was allowed to pursue quite creatively in a way, in the space of the business, of course, but I think I had space to express my ideas and my creativity in a different setting.
Yeah, okay, I see. So like, I guess your relationship with art before was more of a hobby passed on by your father, I guess. And what did you try to kind of integrate that in your job, or is that something that's kind of not really possible? Because I guess maybe for our listeners as well, if you can tell us what were you actually doing in banking, because finance is such a broad term that it helps kind of narrow, in what field you were specifically.
Of course. So the last role I had was sales on the equity markets, so on the trading floor, really, and managing client relationships in that front. And the previous one, so my first job out of university, was a very similar one, but on a multi-asset desk. Okay. So I was selling all sorts of assets, not just stocks. And to your question about whether art was involved, it's funny, it was. And I realized this afterwards, that one of the last initiatives I had in my last role was a Christmas event for clients inside the museum in Milan. And I took a big group of clients to visit the Museo del Novecento, so the modern art museum and contemporary. And I bumped into a client after I had left, maybe a couple of years later. And she told me, well, no wonder you ended up in art. You were already showing art to people when you were in banking. I didn't see that coming, but she saw it coming, which was funny. So I definitely always tried to get people involved in this way around something else rather than the markets.
Okay, yeah, that's very nice. And I think anyway, like it's, we'll talk about this obviously after, but I guess, it's very similar if you're like selling, I mean, not similar, but there's a resemblance to selling maybe like equity, stocks, and then selling art. There's kind of some skills that will be transferred in a way, but we'll get to that in the next part. But first, I just want to know also, so after all these years, what was kind of for you the tipping point when you realized that maybe finance wasn't really your end game?
Good question. I think it's a matter of how you perceive what you value over time. And I realized that evolved with age, with experience. What would fulfill me before was no longer the same thing that fulfilled me when I decided to shift. I think when you are in a corporate career in finance, or also another corporate role, I guess you're always working towards a target, whether it's a sales target, a revenue number, or a new deal, or something to bring in. And this is true for every business, also the business I am in right now. But in that moment, I no longer saw the reason to keep pushing towards that target. I asked myself, what for? Will it give me more of what? More money, more prestige, more, I don't know, more image to my colleagues. I was really trying to understand what's driving me deep down, okay? And with art and with pursuing something else, I realized it was no longer going towards a distant target. It was doing right now what I want to do in that moment.
Yeah.
So that was the shift, a long-term goal rather than something that you choose every single day and the way you want to spend your time.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. It is. I think it's good because it's kind of like you've made some like self-reflection to yourself. And I think a lot of people kind of go through that point in life as well when they've been so long in a career. and they feel like, something needs to change eventually. So I didn't stay in banking as long as you, but throughout my third year, I was thinking to myself, is this something I really want to pursue and stay in this, or do I want to change? And the way I kind of went about it was to do not really not gonna say a pros and cons list, because that sounds like I'm buying something, or it's not as an important decision, because it kind of is, if you're changing careers drastically. But yeah, it made me also think why am I doing this? Just like you say, is it the money, the prestige, the image you get? What is this target going to get me? So I fully understand that. No, I think that totally makes sense. But also I feel like a lot of people, because it's so hard to change careers, it's hard to take that step. It's very it takes courage to do it. Even if you realize that you want to do it, doing that step is kind of hard. And how did you kind of then mentally prepare yourself to that, knowing you were leaving behind, what was you were used to this after 8 years, it's I'm not going to say your whole life, but it's quite
life,
your adult
sure.
life. Yeah, of course.
You do need to be a bit reckless, for sure, and just embrace the risk. What helped me in the transition was education. So after leaving banking, I went to study at Sotheby's Institute in London. And just like university, it gives you the time to understand the field you're going into, network with people, understand the moving parts. So when you come into the market, the job market after, you're a bit more aware of what's going on. And that for me was crucial. I could not have gone straight from one to the other.
Yeah. I think it's kind of someone who is fresh out of university, isn't sure what to do, or is exploring, then goes to do a master's, or when someone goes to do an MBA and then shifts careers. I think it gives you that breather in a way. And so how did you choose Sotheby's particularly, and what courses did you take?
I took some art history courses and art business. Okay. And I chose it because, they are one of the two really market leaders when it comes to auctions and in general shaping the art market. And I had come across their programs in the past, and I found emails from 2018, 2019, when I was asking them, do you think your courses are compatible with a full-time job? And they were like, no. So it was in my mind for a long time. I thought I could have done it maybe on the weekends or something. So I was there. And I just, went into it full-time.
Okay, so I was going to ask you actually, so you quit banking and then you went to do that. It's not like you took night classes and juggled the two.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was drastic.
It was okay, got it. And so you've had that leaving banking, and then a lot of people are maybe still not able to do that move and change. What is kind of maybe some advice you would give someone who is, I'm not going to say stuck in a corporate life, but is still is thinking of what is next for them, but are still unable to take that step?
Well, I would say to really weigh the pros and cons, because I always like to tell people when they say, I wish I could just follow my passion and drop everything. And I say, there is no arbitrage. So, you get something, you give something up. Mm-hmm. And what you give up is a bit more stability in your setup, in your life. And so what I always tell my friends who ask me this is really assess the environment you're in and what it gives you versus what you aspire to do. Yeah. Because if you're in a place that still fulfills you in certain ways and gives you a safety net, and you manage to pursue the passion you have, maybe on the side in the beginning, and then if it takes off, you just leave. But, it's not black or white. Yeah. Sometimes, Andrea, that was on your podcast before, she's doing it on the side and she's doing it really well. So I don't think it's necessarily one or the other, at least in the beginning. It's probably a safe way to do it in between, mm-hmm. if you're in a place where you still get something out of it.
What are some, though I assume there are some similarities, what were some initial things that you leverage from your background to apply to, you launching your new art advisory firm, which we'll talk about?
Considering that I was doing sales in banking, what I realized as I started doing this work is that I knew how to do it in the sense of I knew how to manage a pipeline of client relationships, understanding and mapping out the opportunities, keeping track of things, coming up with new ideas to engage clients or potential clients. It's all things I had done before for a long time and in a very structured and disciplined way, with very good partnerships with whether it's curators, gallerists, or artists directly. I think I bring the know-how on the business front and then the right resources and knowledge from the art world.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a great way to leverage what you know and then understand like where you lack that, strength, and then leverage what you can have around you until you get to it probably. And so before we, continue talking and then to understand really actually what you're like building here, can you tell us in your own word, what is Bianca Arte?
Of course.
Is my accent right?
It's perfect.
I was trying to say it in Italian.
It's perfect, and I enjoy having an Italian name. Just a bit of a challenge. Bianca Arte is an advisory firm focusing on contemporary art, targeting specifically the next generation of art collectors. So there is a big component, not just on the commercial side, but also on educating. Whoever is young and passionate about the art, and maybe they already collect, maybe they're just approaching the art market. And so we allow them to access more easily and with more awareness of what's happening and how to approach a purchase.
Yeah, okay. And so is there a significance behind the name, or like what is the story behind that?
Yeah. So Bianca was the sister of Lorenzo de' Medici. Okay. And, the Medici were rulers of Florence during the Renaissance, and they were patrons of the arts, probably the biggest patrons of the arts during the Italian Renaissance. The likes of Michelangelo, Botticelli. Okay. They were funded by the Medici, but also helped, hosted, and prompted to create work. And so I like that patrons of the art angle. And they were also, they were also bankers. Okay. They were actually the first bankers. Oh, really? They were bankers to the Pope. And they created banking as we know it in many ways. So it's interesting to see that this duality between art and finance was there since the very origin of the sector.
Oh, interesting. Well, you learn every day. I had no idea. Okay, I like that.
And of course, Bianca is a woman's name, and I thought it's nice to just bring that element as well.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a reference to, I don't know, like something more cheesy, like, your mom, or like your middle name or something like that. But I really like the explanation. Okay, very cool. And so what is the market need kind of you're serving, and how did you see an opportunity in here?
This happened very organically, actually. As I got out of my studies in art, I started having friends just asking me about art that they wanted to buy because they realized I was moving around the art market. And I realized that, in our demographics, so early 30s, young professionals with a good education, with an interest and the curiosity for art and the budget for it as well, there was a need to help them access the art market and break that barrier of confidence that is often there whenever somebody is not already an established collector. Galleries can be a bit of an intimidating space, and in general, it can be daunting to understand whether you're buying something that deserves that price tag or not. We are absolutely overwhelmed with images online. We see artists on Instagram, on Pinterest. There's art everywhere, but how do you tell what is a good investment and what is not? Which artist has the potential to have a good career? And it's not just about making a financial investment, but also a cultural investment, understanding the significance of an artist in the broader context of the market. And I found that there was a need to guide my audience in that in that process.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, I feel like, I mean, I am your audience, put it out there, because I mean, I totally agree, because we always see like stuff online, even if you're not, I mean, in galleries as well, obviously, like, but it's so hard to tell also, because one thing I notice is you have a lot of similarities between some of them. Like, I follow a few artists, like, you know, on Instagram. A lot of them, like, one might be in the UK, one in Australia, one in like the US. They might even have a similar kind of style. And then you're like, okay, but I like all of them. The price ranges are maybe similar. How do I pick one? You know, and it's very hard to tell, especially if you're not kind of in that field. So I totally see, like, you know, the need for that. And I think it's really great, because a lot of people also, yeah, as you say, like, it's quite daunting to ask if you're in an art gallery, because you for me at least, like, if I'm going to ask, they're going to assume I can pay. And probably I can't, but I just want to, you know, like, get educated as well, because it's all part of the process. Like, you see something you like, you want to understand, like, you know, where it stands, like the value of it, even if you can't really afford it now. Maybe you're trying to position it against like other art pieces. So now I think it's a really good idea, to be honest.
Thank you. Maybe you can afford something smaller to begin with, right? But you should still be able to ask and move around this world independently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you say that, you know, obviously you said that you made some friends through the courses that you took, and that kind of like brought the idea. But were you actually originally going with the intention of doing something else, or was that all along your plan with Bianca Arte?
There was certainly no clear plan as I went into my studies. I knew that I would want to do something in the art market, and I understood very quickly that for where I was in my career, doing something independently would have made more sense than being employed by somebody. Because I was coming in with a certain seniority, right? But at the same time, I was new to the sector. So going into a corporate would have meant really starting from the very beginning. Whereas I felt like I had enough experience to run this myself and, you know, rely on partners for the parts that I was missing. But I did not know that Bianca would take this shape. It went evolving as business opportunities came through, really. So the focus on young collectors and next generation came through because these are the people that were asking me for things and for guidance. And then, you know, the focus on the education and more academic side of the business also came because I realized there was an appetite for it and not just the commercial help.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's also like, it's very interesting the point you mentioned where like you knew you had to do it on your own rather than go work elsewhere, because that tends to be also an issue with people who want to shift completely careers. You're quite senior to enter like, you know, a role in a field that's completely different at a low level. So you kind of have that disconnect, which you're like, okay, do I take a step back in my rankings just to learn something from the start, you know, in a different field? Or how do you go about it? So I think it really makes sense. And it's great that you're doing that, because I feel like you have the confidence to do it because you know that you're well equipped. And it's very important, I think, to people to realize that sometimes and like have the confidence in themselves that they can actually do it as well. And so obviously, like, you know, once you finish the studies, what were the first steps you took to launch? Like, you know, from the website that you have, the connections you're talking about that we're going to expand on, the clients that you have, like what is the first thing maybe that you did, you know, when you knew you were, okay, I'm launching after the class courses? How did you go about it?
With regards to Bianca specifically, the business really emerged first, and then I built the infrastructure around it after. So I had business before having an Instagram or before having a website. I really focused on the sales and just the showing art to the right people, the art that I started coming across. The first deals started coming through from, you know, friends or friends of friends, people that started approaching me because they wanted to access the art. And then coming from finance, I guess it was quite natural for me to start bridging these two worlds and starting working with corporates as well. So no longer just individuals, but corporate projects or partnerships that were leveraging in a way my background and my experience in that field. So I'm working, for example, with a big private bank in Italy, offering sessions, educational sessions on the art market for their audience, and both clients and prospective clients, in a way that merges the two sectors. We're hosting them in the headquarters of the bank, sponsored by the bank, to the same audience that would come to Bianca.
Okay, no, that's super interesting. It's nice that you have the corporate side and the individualistic side, because I guess you treat them differently and they will have different needs, obviously. So it kind of gives you a bigger breadth of projects to work on. And so suppose one of my listeners, kind of it resonates with him what you're doing, and they reach out and they want to be a client. What can they expect from this journey with you, and how would it go about?
I guess the way it would start is to understand where they are in their journey with art. If they are starting from scratch, or if they are already familiar with galleries, with art fairs, and especially with their taste. Because in order to have a taste, you need to have seen a lot of things. And sometimes I ask people what do they like, and they panic because you don't have enough backlog of images in your mind to tell me I like figurative, I like abstract, I like this kind of palette or this kind of mood, or art with a political meaning. These are all things that you build the more you see and the more you learn. So for those who really start and don't even have that awareness yet, the first few steps would be to see art together. So a lot of what I'm doing is getting people involved in connecting with the art in person. And I always say, please, not on the apps, not on Instagram, not online. It's a great tool when you're already experienced. There are people, I have clients who buy just from seeing a picture. But when you're starting, the relationship you build with the painting in person or with an artist in person is going to be very different. So I would take my clients to meet artists in person. I would take them around art fairs, explain the background, the history of certain pieces, of certain movements, so that they start placing them in a broader perspective and develop a taste. And then, of course, based on a lot of things we see and based on the budget, then we narrow down to what would be the appropriate pieces for a purchase.
No, that makes totally sense. I feel like, it's so important. Like you say, the more you see, the more you know kind of what you like. And that's why I love going to art galleries, going to art fairs as well, just to see, because also when you see it in person compared to in a picture, there are certain emotions that you feel, because the colors are different, obviously, than from a picture. The reactions you get out of it is, for me, more important also than, how it looks hanging on a wall in a living room, because it's so nicely done for Instagram. So I think that's super important. And so what are some maybe artists that you're currently working with, or that you've taken some clients to that you really like?
Of course. So maybe it's the time to talk about this baby.
Yes.
Vanessa Jackson. She is one of my absolute favorite artists, and an artist I've been working on and with for almost a year now. She is 70 plus. Oh. So she is one of those artists that are already well established and culturally significant. She's a Royal Academician, which is a very prestigious title. They are the ones who run the Royal Academy, and they are elected by a committee of peers. So it's a very important recognition to have. She had public installations in Piccadilly Circus a few years back. She's part of big collections, and she's one of those artists that I like to focus on. Her focus was more on the teaching. She was teaching generations of artists for years, and she never really put much thought into the growth of the market from a commercial perspective. And then things start shifting when you start having galleries exhibiting her work, which is happening now, and the work is being placed in important collections, and it's being shown by prestigious galleries. And I like her because she's, as you can see, an abstract geometric painter, and she fits into this abstraction trend that started in the 60s in the UK and a bit earlier in many other countries. She was the student of Paul Huxley, who is one of the first British abstractionists. And the way she does abstraction is quite unique because there is a dynamic to the works. There is a play with optical effects, which places her a bit more into the op art side of things as well. And this is a tiny work, but if you see the big ones, the ones that are 2 meters tall, they really have a life. They have movement. And she has a very cautious approach to color. The colors she combines are very carefully chosen to complement each other and stand out. And she will not mix other colors with those ones. And it's all very calculated to have an impact on your eyes. And if you talk to her, we visited her in November, and there is so much more philosophy that goes into her work and the way she likes to stand out from the rest of the art history that she fits in. Yeah, no, it's super nice. Honestly, like the colors, even on a small scale, are very, popping. Yeah. It's very nice. Do you only work with local artists, or like how do you go about finding, those artists and then the projects you want to work on? So the art scene, especially in contemporary art, is very local. So if you're based in London, chances are you will focus mostly on London-based artists. I am between London and Milan, so I follow some of the artists that are based in Italy as well. But I would say London is where I get access to most of the art. And some of it would be through curators that have been working with these artists for a very long time. And especially for the younger artists, I can meet them organically. For example, another young artist that I've been working on, and I'm a big fan of his work, is Norberto Spina. He's Italian, also studied at the Royal Academy and based in London. And I met him at the Royal Academy School's graduation show last year. Nice. And I thought he has so much talent. He's going to have a very good career, and he's already had his own solo show in a gallery in London. Just had his first solo show in Italy now during the Art Week in Milan. And he has his eyes on him. He has eyes on him from different players in the market. And you can tell his talent because you recognize the work from afar. Whatever he does, you will know it's him. And I think this is what makes an artist stand out. I believe a lot in him. I fully agree that, it's nice that you can tell an artist just by looking at the painting wherever it is, like across the street, like in a restaurant. You can tell from their mark and like their brush strokes that it's them. So I really like that. And so just like kind of coming back to more on like your personal experience here, do you feel like having transitioned from finance to the art world, that your own identity has kind of changed in all of that, or do you kind of still carry both sides with you? I wouldn't say changed. I think I've been myself throughout, and I carry with me in the art world a lot of the kind of structure and discipline from finance that we discussed earlier. What has moved, though, is probably I have, allow me the term, unleashed the more creative side and the more, I guess, a bit more fun. I am having a bit more fun trying things out and making mistakes. I guess it's not just about being in art, but in general, being an entrepreneur. Yes. Your risk tolerance naturally goes up. So I allow myself to experiment more things, and I have fun with it, with a bit less restriction than before. No, fair enough. And so how has your like definition of success kind of evolved throughout your life in banking and then now as an entrepreneur? Goes back to what we were discussing earlier in a way. I think in banking and in corporate life in general, at least my experience was that success is going from A to B. And B is a very well-defined target. Or even in university, your target is a mark on the exam, or your next promotion, or your next pay rise. And you know exactly that if you work very hard in the process between A to B, you'll get to B. A more linear definition of success, I would say. Now, as an entrepreneur, firstly, the B evolves all the time. So you can place targets. I have a business plan, I have targets in mind, but you need to be very flexible with it because what worked last year might not work this year. Better opportunities might come across. So it's no longer so linear. It becomes, in my case at least, a lot more about how I'm spending my time.
Yeah.
So for me, the success is waking up and doing what I absolutely love to be doing and seeing that it pays off. And the payoff might be different from what I had in mind, maybe better, maybe worse, maybe in a completely different form, but just seeing that it pays off while I do what I wake up happy to do.
Yeah.
This is success. And
Yeah.
when you work for a long-term target in the previous life, you don't mind if you're tired, miserable, you go for it and then you achieve it and then you're happy.
Yeah.
But the process is a bit painful.
That's true.
Now I guess I'm enjoying the process more as well.
I think that's how it should be anyway. So it's super nice. And so I'm going to nicely wrap this up with my final question. And if you were to have a conversation today with your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Oh, I like this question.
Self-reflection moment.
I would tell her to take everything a little less seriously, because she would learn not to do that further down the line. So
Okay.
might as well
Early start.
might as well start a bit sooner.
I like that. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice. I think it's, you shouldn't take life too seriously anyway in general. So I love that. But thank you so much, Francesca. It was a pleasure to have you on and to learn about, what you do and how you change. I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of people, that are still in banking, for example, or any corporate world.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to The Seat of the Muse, and I'm so grateful you chose to spend this time with me. If something stirred you today, a thought, a feeling, a question, I'd love for you to subscribe and follow on your favorite platform, leave a review, and even share this episode with a friend. Your support truly fuels this space and helps invite more voices to sit down with me. Until next time, stay curious.